Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our Cars Reading Skills Workshop with your hosts, Jack and Molly. Jack, this one's kind of a fun passage because just like last episode, we're dealing with economics. Okay. In our last
Yeah.
episode, we were doing a drier passage on economics. This one, which is the daily passage from December 3rd, it's called Microloans. This one I feel like is very different in the tone, although it's still in economics, which is
Right,
kind of fun.
right. Our luck, right?
I know.
But I think that we need to embrace the most difficult passages if we want to improve, right? And
Agreed.
this isn't necessarily a difficult passage, but the topic itself, economics, that's not something like pre-meds usually go gravitate towards, right? When they
Yeah.
sign up for classes. But again, the goal is try to improve, and the way we improve is by reading on topics that we may not necessarily be strong in. And so I'm excited to jump into this because we can probably learn a different perspective on economics and an approach to reading it than we did last week.
I agree. Yeah. And it's kind of cool to see like the full breadth of like the variation that these cars subjects can provide. Because this one reads very different despite it being also economics. So pretty fun. And for anyone who's listening to this car skills workshop for the first time, basically what we're going to do is we're going to go through one of our Jack Weston daily passages. You could find it on our website if you're listening on December 3rd, or you could find the link in the chat or in the description. And we're going to go through sentence by sentence and talk about how to evaluate what arguments or sentences in the passage are actually really important and how to kind of cut through the noise and, again, figure out what the author's main points are. So, in that same vein of intention, let's go ahead and hop in to our first sentence. This is sentence one of paragraph one. And it says Nobel Prize winning economist Muhammad Yunus is known for creating the idea of microcredit, giving tiny loans to poor people as a way of helping them. Okay, so we have this individual who's creating microcredit. Okay, so this, just this person is known for this. Okay, that's pretty straightforward, but they're also defining what microcredit is for us. Okay, so we have Eunice saying microloans are these small loans for poor people in the author's words.
Right. And it says it's an idea. I don't know if it's really an idea or a definition, but definitions can be ideas, right? Because we can define things in many different ways. And so to the author, or at least to Eunice, the idea here is very clear, right? You're giving tiny loans, small loans, right? And anytime I read something like this that is not necessarily relevant to my life, because none of us are probably bankers, right?
Yeah.
So think about what a loan is, right? It's giving money to someone for some sort of return, some sort of interest, right? So you get your money back plus some, right? So tiny loans, something, okay, what is a tiny loan? $5,000, $2,000, right? Like you can't buy a house, at least not in America or Canada with that much money, but a tiny loan, maybe 10, maybe $20,000. Okay, I'm trying to visualize what this looks like. If I'm reading this and I'm not present and I'm not really paying attention and you're just using your eyes to like scan the words, you're not doing yourself any favor. Okay. Please pay attention even when it's boring, even when it's not interesting, right? Take your time, slowly read it, digest it, absorb it. And that way it makes the rest of this passage much easier to read. So right now we understand the idea. It's microcredit, tiny loans, micro loans to poor people as a way of helping them. Okay.
Perfect. All right. The significance of Eunice's alternative banking system is not only that it helps poor people, it also provides a critique of specific aspects of capitalism. Okay, I feel like the first sentence we had something important, this idea of microcredit. It helps poor people. You've already explained, right? It's helping people because of these tiny loans. We're restating, yes, it helps poor people, but not only that, it also critiques capitalism, and that makes it significant. right? So this is another idea that we want to track. Paragraph one is only two sentences, and ultimately they're both important, right?
Yeah.
And they're building off one another. So microloans, right, or microcredit, these tiny loans help poor people, and it also critiques capitalism.
I can see as a reader, as like if I were someone reading this right now with us, I would think, how do they transition to specific aspect critiquing capitalism? Like how did
Yeah.
that happen, Molly? Like, can you explain how we need to like understand this? Because I'm so confused. We were talking about microcredit, but now all of a sudden we're talking about capitalism. What about capitalism? Like, what is it trying to say here? I'm so like if I were a student, I'd be confused.
Totally. And honestly, I mean, it's we don't want you to feel confused and overwhelmed in a negative sense. What I want you to feel when you read that is curious. Like, oh, okay, you just defined this for me. Now we're talking about the significance of microcredit as the author has defined it. The significance is an argument. Okay, we've already stated that it helps people. That shouldn't be a surprise. We're making an argument that this microcredit is significant because it critiques capitalism. They haven't really explained how it critiques capitalism, right? I'm not clear on that, and you shouldn't be. What you should be is curious,
Right.
right? I understand that this means or this is one reason the author feels this is significant, right? I need to know that it critiques capitalism, but it has be curious, like, author, how is this related, right?
Right. And also, with the idea itself proves or critiques, right? Critique doesn't necessarily mean bad, right? Critique
Mhm.
means like we're going to assess, right? You critique a movie show, right? Doesn't mean it's a bad movie show because you critique it. Critiquing means you're giving your insight into it,
Yeah.
right?
Evaluating.
So yes, we can evaluate capitalism better because of this idea. That's what it's trying to say. So it is transitioning to, okay, yeah, we're talking about microloans, we're talking about this microcredit stuff, right? But we can also talk more globally about capitalism because we're talking about microcredit, right? So
Absolutely.
that's how I would read it. But I think you're absolutely right too. Like this idea of significance, like how is it significant to it, right? So yeah, I'm excited to read the rest,
Yeah.
see what's going.
Yeah, it's probably something that we're going to get into here in P2. So let's take a look. So we're now in paragraph two of our passage. It says Eunice acknowledges that, quote, capitalism is in serious crisis, end quote, and identifies the crises in food, energy, and the environment as having a host of immediate economic and physical causes. Okay, so notice in this sentence, we're not talking about microcredit anymore, right? We've already set our stage in P1 that microcredit critiques capitalism in addition to our definitions. But in this sentence in P2, we're really focused on capitalism itself, right? Capitalism is in crisis, according to Eunice. Probably we're going to tie this back to microcredit and how this relates. But for now, capitalism is in crisis, and we know it's a pretty widespread set of causes.
Right.
They listed a couple, but it's a crisis.
Right. Food, energy, environment. I would just visualize all of this, right? And that's a strategy we discuss in our program is visualization, the act of really trying to put yourself into the author's perspective, right? What is the author trying to see? And so in this case, capitalism is in trouble, right? There's some sort of trouble for it. Okay. And Eunice is being quoted saying that, so we know Eunice supports this idea.
Yes.
Okay.
He states quite clearly, quote, they all have one thing in common. Now, the quote doesn't end here, it's going to extend, but already he is probably Eunice. He's stating clearly that all these things, probably food, energy, environment, share something. Okay, so now you've got me curious. What do they share? We got to keep reading. It says they all reflect the inadequacy of the current economic system. Okay, so all three of them are showing that the economic system is inadequate, probably, right? I'm constantly kind of visualizing myself holding the most recent idea. The most recent idea is that capitalism is in serious crisis. When I get this, they all reflect the inadequacy of the current economic system. I'm thinking to myself, that sounds kind of like capitalism as our economic system
Right.
is not enough. It's in crisis, it's inadequate. this feels like it's just supporting that earlier idea. So let's keep reading. Again, we're still in this long quote by Eunice. It says,
Yes.
in each case, we confront social problems that cannot be solved solely by the free market as it is currently understood. And this is the end of this quote. So it sounds like there are problems that can't be solved by capitalism. And
Isn't this kind of the same thing as capitalism is in crisis?
I think it's still close enough that I would call it part of that idea. We
Yeah.
might go off on a tangent and get really in depth with social problems, in which case, sweet, I'll call it new there. But I think, especially given that this is an extended quote by Eunice, and this is part of Eunice's original idea, I think right now we're safe to say same. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing, but you're right. It does bring in this new element of social problems that can't be solved solely by the free market. Free market meaning probably capitalism. Now, if you don't know that, that's okay. Get used to reading things that may have different names, right?
Yeah.
Like in this case, the name here they changed it up on us, right? And yeah, that might sound unfair, but if you read a lot, you start noticing these things, right? Especially if you read a lot of Cars passages, they like to use different terms to describe the same thing. And so, yeah, I would say it's interesting, but it's not direct enough to be a different argument, a different direction, right? So
Agreed.
I would just keep that in mind and continue reading.
Completely agreed. Okay, let's look at our next sentence. So, pointing to the major upheaval of the 2008 collapse of large sectors of the global financial system, Eunice states, and we've got another quote, one thing is clear, the financial system has broken down because of a fundamental distortion of its basic purpose. End quote. Okay, so we're talking about 2008 collapse, but ultimately we're still on Eunice and Eunice's belief. I'm interested because we're saying the financial system has broken down. That sounds like another way to describe capitalism. You're right. They love using different words for the same like subject. This is breaking down. Capitalism is in crisis. We get a fundamental distortion of its basic purpose. And that makes me think, wait a minute, you're about to give me a reason why it's breaking down.
Yes.
Maybe you're going to be more specific, but right now, no. It's a
Right. I
dot,
mean,
dot,
like,
dot.
it's so unfair to read this and then go, wait a second. What is that fundamental distortion of its basic purpose? Like, what is the problem with its purpose? And
Mhm.
that's coming up. And that tells me that next sentence is going to be very, I don't even have to read it. I already know, like, that's like the meat of this paragraph. I already know that whatever that sentence that's coming up is going to say is really the point that Eunice really cares about, or the author at least cares about that Eunice states. Okay,
Okay. Yeah, we've been nudging, the author has been nudging you in this particular direction. Let's hope this clarifies. It says that purpose for Eunice is moving money from those who have it to those who need it. All right, so this must be the basic purpose that is not being solved by capitalism. Okay. So basically we are supposed to in our financial system help those who need help. That's what it sounds like. Right? It
right.
help those who need help. That's what we should be doing. Capitalism doesn't, and it's in crisis.
You know, why couldn't they just boil this paragraph down to, hey, capitalism isn't working because it's not helping move money around the right way to people who need it. Like that's
I
literally
know.
what this paragraph was trying to say. And if they just said it directly, we'd all have a better life, right? But
Yeah.
here's the thing. You have to understand why the author wrote the way they wrote this. They want to come off more believable. They want to come off as an authority, someone who's been thinking about this in a novel way, right? Someone who's been very thoughtful about all this. So the author has to kind of spruce it up, right? Kind of make it sound way more difficult than it really is to get their point across, right? And so if you're a little like agitated by the fact that you have to read this whole paragraph to just get to this bottom point idea, don't be. This is just the nature of cars passages, right? Of any kind of article that you read on a topic like this. And your job is just to find that big part without getting overwhelmed by the little details, right? And that's hopefully what we did together right now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, great.
Yeah, I even feel like that applies beyond cars too. I mean, even when you're trying to learn science, like if you try and study from someone's study guide that has already been summarized for you, you're probably not going to really learn that well. Whereas when you read a textbook and you've got a lot of extra context to
Yeah,
engage with, you're still picking up on those major points that might have been in someone's study guide, but it's going to stick with you. Right? Think about it. These people writing these passages are trying to convince you of something. They don't want to just give you the bullet point, this is what I want you to believe,
right,
because they haven't convinced you. They just told you, right? It's like show, don't tell, right?
right.
They're trying to make their point super clear. So in a way, it's that's what our job is trying to
I,
figure out what is the point here.
the way I look at it is it's a one-way conversation. Like
Yeah.
we can't like this is all written, so we can't just stop and interject and comment and write and ask a question or do whatever to the author because the author's written their point of view. And so yeah, this is reading in a one-way conversation style that we need to like fully embrace, right? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's too philosophical, but when I think of it that way, it makes it easier to read.
Yeah, no, it does. I feel like sometimes we need to get into the cars philosophy, especially for passages that might be harder for some students, right? You can apply the same set of strategies for all of them. Um, okay, so how would you kind of sum up what we should learn from P2 compared
Yeah,
to
I mean, just
P1?
this idea that capitalism is in crisis and the purpose of financial systems, like, in this case, loans, I guess, um, is, or at least capitalism, is to move money around, right? To help people who need the help, right? To move money in a way that helps people.
Yeah,
And it seems like that's not happening. And that moving money kind of sounds like loans, right?
yeah,
I'm trying to like tie it back to the first paragraph, but we don't necessarily have to, right? It's
yeah,
just talking about this idea that essentially money is not being moved the right way to help people, right?
yeah,
So we need to understand what is the right way, right? That's
yeah,
probably where the author is going with this.
totally. Because this paragraph is all about capitalism. And our first paragraph connected microloans to capitalism. I'm sensing this next paragraph is going to really make that connection clear since
Do
we
you
just
think,
gave a bunch of context about
yeah,
capitalism pretty much alone.
right. Do you think, Molly, like we need to know the definition of capitalism? Is that important here? Like I
Um,
could see a student asking that right now. Like, do I need to know what capitalism is?
I feel like it's something that it might help, but I think if as long as you understand that it's a system that or a financial system that according to the passage is in crisis and it's not helping those who need it, I honestly think you're fine. I don't
Right.
think you need to be an economist to do well in this. Like understanding the maybe the basics, like understanding that America is a capitalistic society, like some
Right.
sort of basic context is helpful.
Right.
But no, I don't think you really need to know the definitions.
I think like for every topic, there are probably key terms that you should probably know, right? Like in history, you should understand how like timing works. Like 18th century, what does that mean? That means
Yeah.
1700s, right? I think when you think about economy, you think about like different kinds of economies. So it doesn't hurt to study that. Like just ask GPT, what is capitalism? What is this? What is that after you read this, right? Because I think in the future you may get a passage on economy and it might refer to capitalism, might make your life easier because you feel more confident reading it. It's sort of like anatomy. Like no one needs to take anatomy to take the MCAT. But if you do take it, right, you're going to feel way more comfortable with whatever random parts of the body they bring up, right? Even though it's not necessarily super important for the passage itself. So in this case, I would say it's always helpful to learn more about the topic, but it's not absolutely necessary, like you said, because if you just know capitalism is in crisis, even if you don't know exactly how that economic system works, you'll be okay.
Yeah. And also, we do get a teeny, teeny, teeny bit of economics in psych soc, actually, when we talk about social structures and demographics and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
a little sliver. It's not a focus, but if anyone is thinking about, like, oh, I should really study that, you actually will get a little bit in talking about like conflict theory and different sociological paradigms. So, kind of interesting. You actually
right.
probably will learn the definition of capitalism for psych soc.
Right.
And it will also carry over here, which is always good.
Also,
Um,
also one more thing to add, sorry, th this idea of capitalism is sort of expressed, right? Like if you keep reading, you'll actually start catching on to what it is, right?
yeah,
It says free market. So capitalism is really about a free market. Like anyone can sell whatever they want and buy whatever they want at whatever price is, right? And so if that's not clear, that's okay, but that's essentially what it is. So as you read, you learn, right? They define things, they help you understand things. So yeah, the answer to that question, if anyone's asking, is you probably don't need to worry about it.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And use context. If you ever don't know the meaning of a word, look around it, right?
Right.
Try and use context clues and you'll be fine. Okay, let's look at our third paragraph. So, in developing his microloans, Eunice studied the villagers near his university and in the process began to understand village life and the life of the people. All right, so we're back on microloans. P1 was about microcredit or tiny loans. Brought in capitalism. P2 is about capitalism. Now we're back to microloans. So hopefully we'll tighten this back up and we'll really explain how microloans reflect capitalistic issues. But okay, for this, I'm thinking it's just context. It's not really an argument. I'm just kind of imagining Eunice while, studying at university is learning about village life. So maybe he's going to get more exposure to poor people as the author describes them. Maybe it's just helping us understand microloans. This up close and personal, bottom up perspective showed how loan sharking, the practice of offering high interest loans to those in need within the village, contributed to keeping those poor people poor. Okay, so now we're understanding loan sharking. And this should sound really different from the idea of the microloans or the microcredit, right? Tiny loans to poor people to help them is very different from high interest loans that keeps poor people poor, right? That's obviously not helping. That's hurting people. Okay, so we're introducing loan sharking, and that I think is worth noting, especially given that we have defined loan sharking here, and it's pretty contrasting of an idea to Eunice's idea. So just helping us understand how this thing came about.
What if I don't understand high interest loans? Like let's say I've never had a car or something that required a loan, right? What then? You
I
know,
just use context.
yeah,
Keeping poor people poor. That's
yeah,
obviously not something that's serving them very well. It's not
right.
helping. That's hurting,
Yeah,
right?
and sharking, like
Yeah.
if you're a shark on something, that probably means you're a little greedy or a little, it has a negative connotation for sure, right? Loan sharking. But you don't even need that negative connotation. You just need to understand the definition here. Like you said, keeping people poor, right? So, okay, great.
Yeah. Okay, helping poor people understand these conditions presented a seemingly unsolvable theoretical and political puzzle. Okay, so it's hard. It's hard to help people when they're being essentially preyed upon, right? When I think of loan sharking, it's funny because actually sharks are my favorite animal by far. I think of a predator, right? It's very
Right.
predatory is how I
Yeah.
imagine this. Um, so it's hard to help people if they're, being preyed upon by loan sharks. So again, the first little phrase of this paragraph said, in developing his microloans. So this whole thing is just giving us the background of what Eunice is experiencing while he's developing his theory. But what we need to track from this is that loan sharks hurts people, right? There's something about this high interest loans, but basically loan sharking keeps poor people poor. And I know that that's fundamentally very different from microcredit, but that's all we're getting in this paragraph.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Okay, so that was P3. Let's look at P4. It says Eunice describes the moment of discovery of thinking outside prevailing economic assumptions and practices. We get a quote here. Suddenly it came to my mind that I could do something. Okay, it's going to continue. There are a couple sentences in this quote, but what I want to reflect on here is we're discovering microloans, right? I'm discovering that I can do something different from loan sharking. Given the context, that's how I'm interpreting this. Okay, why don't I lend the money so that people can come to me? Okay, it's still part of his quote, still part of his sort of revelation. He might be the one loaning money. Okay, I'm going to wait until it's more direct. Then they don't have to go to loan sharks. So, okay, that's the end of the quote. To me, this is just Eunice is discovering his idea. Okay, I'm thinking they're probably going to state the argument more directly, but again, I already know microloans is kind of a an alternative path from loan
Right.
sharks.
And we already know he created it, right? Eunice
Exactly.
created it. So in this case, it's just defined, like it's just explaining the history of microcredit, right?
Yeah.
So microcredit is I guess I will have to read more to see, I guess a solution to this problem, right? Of shark loaning or loan sharking.
Hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, last sentence in P4 here. He created a form of banking that works through individual people loaning money to other individual people who they know and with whom they form a community. Okay, that's a lot more direct. Okay, the form of banking is probably the microcredit, and it's helping connect people within a community, right? It's not loaning from a loan shark, it's loaning from somebody that you know and that you're in a community with. So hopefully maybe a little less predatory, basically.
Right, right. I kind of look at it as like test prep, right? Like we're trying to counteract that predatory nature by being part of the community, right? Instructors that are here that once took the test, right? That understand what pre-meds are going through, right? Because we have so many doctors on our team. I think that's really what we're trying to do here. So I
Yeah.
feel like it has a similar sort of like strategy. So I'll do this.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right,
I know.
cool.
Awesome. Okay, so I feel like that last sentence of P4 that was really the most valuable for us. Let's see how that continues. So here we're now in P5. Eunice's strategy of lending his own money to villagers, trusting that they would pay him back, flew in the face of traditional economic theory and practice. This is so funny. You're right, Jack. It kind of is so aligned with our mission. It's like we provide everything for free. If you need more, we hope you think of us, but go use our free resources,
Right,
right? We're just trying to help our community. We're trying to help everyone, that's trying to become a doctor, become a doctor. If you have the drive for it, go do it, right? We want to support you. Um, that's so funny, right? If you can connect with the passage, that helps. Although, of course, you don't want to start answering questions as if
right,
you are.
right. You don't bring bias in to
Yes,
cool.
yes. But okay, so again, this strategy is unique, basically. It's different from what else has been currently done. So it's different from tradition. And they've kind of set that up already with the idea of loan sharking. So rather than expect that poor people would not be able to pay off a loan, Eunice assumed that they would. So again, I have a totally different, or Eunice has a totally different perspective, right? I'm going to believe the best in you. I'm going to lend you some money and I'm not going to be predatory. So again, it's definitely departing from tradition. Rather than loaning out money from an institution using other people's money, Eunice used his own money. Again, it's different from tradition. It's pretty understandable, but there's not really anything concretely new yet. And the villagers did indeed pay Eunice back his money. Wonderful, right? Like, it sounds like the system is working, at least context clues wise so far. So, okay. And it says this built an economy based on the trust that forms in a community. Okay. I feel like this is overall painting a pretty positive picture. Um, Jack, how would you summarize what we learned here in P5?
I think the last sentence is really critical, right?
Yeah,
Like, like because we don't really like this is an argument. We don't really know if what Eunice did, right, with this micro loan strategy, which is obviously very non-traditional, right,
yeah.
is actually building an economy based on trust, right,
Mhm.
that forms in a community. Like we don't really know if that's the case. So I would keep track of that. Like that, like the rest seems like it's more of like a biography on microloans, which is awesome. And I understand the structure, right? The author started off by talking about what microcredit is, microloans are, and then went on to talk about like basically why it came to about, it came to exist, right? There's a problem in capitalism where loan sharking was a big thing, and it wasn't helping the poor, so he created this microloan. So I'm following the story, but this part seems very important to me because we've never talked about this idea of trust that forms in a community. I'm yes, we should know microloans depart from traditional economics. We should know, really more importantly, that microloans build an economy based on community trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's look at P6. We've got two more paragraphs left, but they're both pretty short. Of course, he could lend or he could not lend everyone money, but poor people who were more economically stable due to the microcredit they received, initially from Eunice and subsequently from one another, became lenders to others who needed microcredit. Wow. Okay. So it sounds like they're trying to really double down and prove that this built an economy based on community trust. It's like, hey, even the people that were borrowers initially are now becoming lenders, right? Like they've been in your shoes and they want to lend you money because they had a resource that helped them. It sounds very much still in line with that idea from P5. Just more context. Eunice had formed a new kind of bank that was based on different principles. So again, it's kind of non-traditional and it's doing something new. Not a lot brand new that we've gotten so far. The bank was not trying to eliminate poverty, but rather organized poor people to fund one another. Again, it kind of sounds like what we had established already here in P5. I think you could start looking at this and saying, well, we never officially said organized poor people. It's like we didn't use those words, but this is the same idea that came before.
Right.
And then last sentence here in P6, the bank that was created in effect was owned by the borrowers. And I still, the phrasing is different, but to me, Jack, I still feel like this is pretty much the same as P5.
And I
What do
feel
you
like
think?
that's probably the main idea.
Yeah.
Right, because this paragraph just rehashes what the last paragraph said. This idea that microloans are different. This idea that microloans are built off trust. Yes, it goes into details into how some people might be excluded, and it really is a bank, right? Like it's a new form of bank, but the idea is the same. This idea of how it's different, the idea of how it's built on trust. I don't see it being, yeah, it's built on community trust, right? Community trust is really the idea here. So yeah, I'm excited because I finally feel like I found the idea. I was thinking maybe the idea was just micro credit, but that can't be the idea, that the main idea of this passage, because that's just a definition, right?
Yeah.
We could, the way that the microcredit idea could be the main idea is if we were trying to debate whether or not the definition is one way or another. Right. But the author hasn't given us multiple definitions about microcredit. So that's not been the debate. The debate has been really about this new concept, and whether or not it's proven to be proven to be good for the community or good for capitalism or good for the economy. And the author is trying to, I guess, make that claim, right? Like this is different, this is new, this is better for poor people. And that's the direction we ended up going in.
Yeah. It's not enough just to know the subject of the passage.
Right.
You have to know what the author is trying to convince you of about that subject. So you're right. I mean, microcredit's definitely the subject, but what is the argument?
Really well said. Yes.
You need both sides. I think a lot of students are really good at finding the subject, but we're not as in tune with what the argument about the subject is. But yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, right? Like, I think the argument is about how microloans work and how it's different from other things and how it might impact the community, right? Microloans create this community trust. That's what they're built on. That seems like what has been established the strongest so far. Okay, let's look at our final paragraph. It says relationships among lenders and borrowers then differed dramatically from traditional banking. Okay, so it sounds like we're still stating that microloans or microcredit is doing something different, non-traditional. Kind of makes sense. We've already gotten into that a little bit. As Eunice explains, quote, conventional banks require collateral. This will be an extended quote again. I feel like half this passage was quoted from Eunice. This is everywhere. Um, so conventional banks require collateral. Based on the context, I'm thinking microloans won't, but let's keep reading. Um, you have to have lots of money to get money from a bank. So I know that's not how microloans work. It sounds like this is pointing out a difference. Keep reading. Um, if you are asking for collateral, you are not going to reach poor people because those are the people who don't have anything. So again, this is maybe showing what is conventional is not helping those that are poor, right? And again, it's showing how this is different. And then it says we don't ask for collateral. Okay, very clear. How do you do that? So how does this system work? Again, that's kind of really been the main idea so far. We already know it, but let's see if they summarize it. We build a relationship between the people and the bank, and we let the people and their neighbors own the bank. So the entire bank is built on community trust. End quote. Jack, I don't know about you, but this felt like, serving up the main idea on a platter. There we
Right.
go again.
Right. It does bring in a lot of different concepts, right? This idea that conventional banks require money to lend money, right?
Mhm.
Collateral, this idea of collateral. What is collateral? Like, okay, you give me, something, and I'll give you something bigger, right? In case you don't return it, I keep whatever you gave me, right? And
Mhm.
this idea that poor people don't have enough money for loans, right? For this collateral, right? So
Mhm.
I would understand that, and I do think conceptually that's important. But you're right. The bigger point here is, hey, we're gonna turn all this around. You don't need collateral. It's all based on trust. Okay.
Yeah. I feel like it comes down to if the argument is all about how microloans are doing something different in building community trust, and connecting that to economy, I feel like it's really important to understand how things were done before. It's like, what is the contrast that this is set against? So,
Right.
yeah, I feel like understanding capitalism and conventional banks and how things are traditionally done is important because if you don't understand that, how can you understand the main idea of how microloans are doing something different? Yeah, you're totally right. Okay, we have one last sentence of our passage here in P7. It says, assuming that members of the community will pay their debts, allows the bank to make loans to assume that those loans will be paid back. So it's just really clinching us up about microloans and community trust. If I trust you, then I can loan to you and we can build that trust within our community.
Awesome. Yeah.
And
So
that's
big
it.
idea here is same as before, right? This idea that microloans build an economy based on community trust. And it does explain other things, right? It does explain how conventional banks work, how they require money to lend money or collateral. And this idea that, poor people don't have enough money for loans, so they can't even get these loans, right? So yeah, I think we know all the little ideas, but we also know the ideas that seem big, seem like they're main ideas, seem like they are repeating from one paragraph to another, which we need to keep track of.
Yes. Yeah. And we know our subject of our main idea. We know the actual argument. We're ready for these questions. So if you are listening for the first time, what I want you to do is to go check out those questions. If you've listened to this all the time, you're probably already pulling it up. You're probably already getting ready for it. But we do include the link in the description to this passage. Or, of course, if you're listening to it on the day that it comes out, you can navigate to jackweston.com. We do post cars passages every single day that should provide a ton of free practice. They're amazing passages, as you can see, hopefully, in this episode. But they also have questions associated. This passage has 6 questions. Because you just listened to the full breakdown, you're going to be really primed and ready to get those questions, or at least have a fair shot in those questions. If you miss it, or you're still struggling, it's probably not because you didn't understand the passage. You can confidently say it's probably something about the question that was tripping you up. Okay, so hopefully, if you listen to this, go ahead and pull it open. These questions are incredibly valuable insights into how you are approaching critical thinking in CARS questions, right? So take that opportunity. There are six for this passage. We hope you enjoy them. They're pretty awesome questions. And we hope you enjoyed this CARS Reading Skills podcast. Whether we're reaching you in the morning, evening, night, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And we hope to see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.